Hey, everybody. Welcome as people roll in to another great Sales Hacker webinar. We've got something special for you today. But first of all, I want to thank you. Thanks for giving us some of your time on this Tuesday. And we feel very honored that you would give us some of your time and actually be here for the live version of this rather than just waiting around to watch the recording. It's important to us. I know your time is important to you. So that means we're going to give you, live attendees, a little bit more of a special experience. So if you're here live, let's act like it. Let's have a conversation. Go ahead down in the bottom of your screen, open up the chat right now. I'm going to be watching that whole time. We'll take your questions throughout. Y'all can talk to each other, share your LinkedIn profile, connect, make some friends. The one thing I want to make sure you do is when you open the chat, see that little blue thing that says panelists? Make that say panelists and attendees so you can see each other. And right now, let's start introducing yourselves. Let us know, what's your role so that we can help cater the conversation to who's here with us today. Maybe share where you are, what company you work for, but definitely introduce yourselves. Want to say hi. And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. It's important. It's important. We're all here today. Set the intention that we're going to interact, have some fun, and learn together. So Jake Miller's here. What a surprise.
Hey, Jake.
Hey.
This is one of the few times when we're all more or less in the same area. You, me, we're all outside of Boston. So we've got Melissa. She's a VP of Sales, Newcom Media in Toronto.
Love
Welcome,
Toronto.
Melissa.
Great town.
I still have never been, but I'd love to go.
It's great.
I have a lot of friends. Come on, folks. Introductions in the chat. All right, great. Len Myers, Senior Business Development. I'm guessing that's a rep in Americas. Iliad Solutions in Houston. Lenwick is a sales coach. The company's in Boston, but he's living in Colorado. That's cool. Ingrid, you're a biz dev manager in Portland, Maine. Alejandro, you're a global director of sales transformation. Kimberly Clark Professional. Cool. Based out of Argentina.
Nice.
Oh, man,
Welcome.
I love the global representation. Welcome, everybody. So feel free to keep the conversation going in the chat. If you ask questions there, I'll make sure that our esteemed panelists answer them as best we can. Let's get started. So we're talking about sales enablement today. Y'all know what you signed up for, but we're specifically talking about how to make sure the rep is at the center of your sales enablement strategy. And the reason you want to do that is so that your sales enablement strategy and your revenue engine are future-proof. As things change, as we go virtual, maybe back to completely virtual or hybrid or not virtual at all, having the rep at the center, grounding your whole strategy, keeps things moving. And so we've got two really, really great experts. Couldn't have anybody better, actually, to talk to us about this today. We've got Jake Miller. He is the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Allego with a strong past in sales as well. I know a really a sales enablement enthusiast at heart, really, Jake. So thanks for being here with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, welcome. And also John Carlson. John is the Senior Director of Marketing at Allego and also just a sales enablement champion. Loves sales enablement managers, sales leaders, making salespeople successful. So we've got some really great tactical, but also some great strategic lessons to share today. You can ask questions throughout. We're going to try to make this conversational. And with that, I'll stop talking because nobody wants to hear from me and hand it over to John.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin. Thanks, everybody, for joining. It's awesome to be here. Love this audience. It's always great to be here. And Jake, always love presenting alongside you. I think this is going to be a great session. I think it's an important one, too. You don't always think of sales enablement as the sexiest topic. I feel like often it's an afterthought. Hopefully not for any of you on the line, but in an organization, it's not always at the top of everybody's mind, but it is literally the engine that drives your sales and your entire go-to-market operation, right? So you need to always be thinking about sales enablement, and especially, I know we're all sick and tired of hearing about COVID, and we're not going to talk about COVID, but there's no denying that since the pandemic began over a year ago, sales enablement and the working world as a whole has changed. And it has forced us to evolve and rethink how we approach such a wide spectrum of work-related and personal-related issues. And sales enablement is no exception. So we're going to talk about how has sales enablement evolved over the past year plus, and how was it evolving even prior to the pandemic, right? And then where is it going? And how can you future proof your enablement efforts and your revenue engine so that you don't get caught off guard, so that you're thinking ahead of the game and using innovative technology and techniques to help get you there. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get started. So we're going to have some agenda points here, but we're not going to show them to you first. Okay, we're going to start with a little bit of context before we talk about how to unlock this rep-centric, seller-driven revenue growth that's going to comprise the core of the conversation. But let's set the scene for just a minute so that we're all starting from the same place, right? So what is the goal of sales enablement? Maybe a silly question, maybe a fundamental one, but let's answer it. According to Forrester, it's to ensure that every seller has the required skills, knowledge, processes, and behaviors to optimize every interaction with buyers, right? So it's about giving sellers the right knowledge and the right tools to deliver their message in an impactful and consistent way that drives revenue. Right? I think we can all generally agree on that. But it's a much more complicated picture, right? There are all these different elements that come into play in sales enablement that we might not always be thinking about as a true sales enablement suite, because that's really what this is. When you think about sales enablement, you need to think about onboarding, training, and coaching, right? So sort of more traditional training aspects of the role. You need to think about sales content management. So that's content that either the sales enablement team is creating or marketing is creating for sales, right? To either learn and train or to distribute to their prospects. So they need to be able to find that content and know how to use it. The sales methodology. What's the playbook that you're all calling plays from as you sell, right? Is it like a corporate visions or a Rain group or Sandler? What's the methodology that you're all pulling from? You need to know that. That's part of sales enablement. People need to be trained on that. Interdepartmental communication or intra-departmental communication just within your sales team. How are you collaborating? How are you communicating with your peers and with your colleagues? How are you learning from them? That's sales enablement. And of course, we all know the analytics side. At least, we think we know the analytics side. But how are you measuring the impact of enablement across the board? And then what are the systems and platforms that you're using to tie all of this together? Each of these individually is a major component of sales enablement. We need to think about all of this holistically. And you'll see that here in the corner we've got a stat. The use of sales enablement solutions has grown by 567% over the last 3 years. That's crazy. That's insane. So people are thinking about sales enablement and sales enablement technology, but I bet you that a lot of folks are using different disparate systems to manage each and every one of these bullet points. And part of what we're going to talk about today is how you might want to rethink that, streamline your technology stack, or at least make it work harder for you and smarter for you so that you combine all of these elements into a cohesive strategy, right, that's powered by integrated platforms, rather than sort of treating each of these as a one-off that goes into enablement. So before we move on, Jake, anything you want to add on this slide or any thoughts about where we're going in general with this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it all kind of comes back to, breaking out the sales process, thinking about what are my conversion rates at each of the stages, and then, how do we optimize from there? And like you said, John, everything now, the whole sales process has become so much more trackable because now, with so much more happening over video conference, right? The gap that used to exist where reps would get out in front of prospects. Now, of course, that's, that can be a better way to do things, right? Because you've got the energy of being in person, you're in the room, you can use more persuasion, etc. And it's also what people know how to do. But that also left a gap in being able to analyze what's going on down to what's happening in the conversations. What are the things that people are actually saying that are leading to those conversion rates at each stage? And so, yeah, there's a lot of just a lot of interesting things that can be done now, to kind of make up for some of the loss of that in-person element that we've had that will probably continue going forward. Like, we're not going back to 100% the way things were.
That's a really important point to make, because I think especially now, a lot of people are looking at the world saying like, oh, maybe we can start going back to normal in some cases. And it's true and it's great in some ways, but things have fundamentally changed, right? I don't think we're ever going back to exactly where we were. And the past year has actually forced us to evolve in a really positive way, especially in the world of enablement, right? We're able to track more than we were before. We're able to stay connected with people in different locations, right, around the world in better ways than we were before. So why would we go back to the old way if we've already discovered some new and better ways to make an impact here? So we'll dive deeper into a lot of this as we go forward, but some good food for thought here. All right, let's Jake, why don't you take away our first tip on how to unlock seller-driven revenue growth, which is it's a little love story. You'll see this whole presentation is a love story. We've got hearts here just to drive home that point. But let's talk about the marriage of learning and content, which are two areas that I think people too often leave separate, right?
Right. Yes. Yep. The learning and content love story. We wanted to get everyone's attention and keep it, and that's what we're doing here. So this is, when you think about kind of the two sides of enablement and what are, the across all of the stuff that we just showed, the remit of what enablement functions do. When you kind of break it down into really kind of two big uber categories, it's really content and what is the strategy, how are we mapping content to each part of the sales process, how are we making sure salespeople are using the right content in the right situations, that they know how to use it, that they're using it effectively. And then the other side, all the stuff around learning, which encompasses coaching, which encompasses onboarding, which encompasses ongoing, just coaching reps to deals, right? All the things associated with, and not sharing knowledge, sharing information from subject matter experts who are in the know and helping reps learn that, whether it be for a launch or ongoing. So those two kind of categories, and we've typically, that is how enablement technologies have kind of wound up bucketing themselves into kind of those two main areas, and that's how our strategies have sort of have been kind of bifurcated in that way too. There's sort of two sides of enablement in that sense. The approach that, and of course, and as you see here, one size fits all, more top down. It's more company centric. It's not as much rep centric. It was more of a function of what was available. I mean, in a big way, the technology is available to support enablement. We're really kind of, you either had your you have your content system, and then over here you've got your learning, and then maybe a separate something for coaching. But bringing them together is, that is the point. And we're saying the evolution is here, right? And it's driven by customers. And this is something that we've seen across, tons of organizations that we've been working with. You're starting to see now, people are starting to write about it, big names in sales enablement. Analyst firms are starting to see this when they're defining what is a sales enablement technology. It's a combination of these two, of learning and content, because, not just because of the, of course there are synergies with, or of course there are, lower total cost of ownership. It's easier to administer, it's easier for the users to have one tool, but there's also a lot of synergies as far as how to run an enablement function more effectively when you've got these two sides of enablement together in one technology, and then one set of analytics, one set of data to look at, one set of of data to be able to model. Okay, not just, okay, we've got over here, what are the most effective content pieces in our content system and which ones are driving revenue, and then and over here we've got, here are the reps who are doing the most of coaching, sharing knowledge with their peers, watching peer videos, getting the most, doing the best on their training and their in their onboarding. But like, what about looking at a single view of, like, what are all the things that a rep is doing? Content they're sharing, coaching they're getting, how are they doing on sales calls, what topics are they speaking to? That's where you can start to really put the rep at the center, what we've got here, and really be able to drive just a much more effective enablement of salespeople. Because at the end of the day, it's about looking at, you've got your top performers, and they know what they're doing, and they're doing it well, and they're kicking butt every year. And it's about, okay, what are all of the different things that they do? How are they interacting with peers? How are they who are the subject matter experts they go to? What content do they share? What messages do they send? What things do they harp on when they're speaking to prospects? All of that stuff, and saying, okay, how can we apply that to bring up the B players, right? And as well as C players too. So this is really why you can, drive a lot more impact with this, and why the world is going in this direction to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of silly that these two categories have been kept separate, right? Like, content powers learning and learning powers content, right? You can't learn without good, usable, digestible, engaging content. And then when you learn and you develop and a rep goes out into the field, they learn something new about how to sell. Why can't they put that learning back into the content, right? Why can't they share what they've learned and, with their peers, and turn that into usable content moving forward? It just makes sense to bring these two worlds together. So that's a really key takeaway here. We got one more slide here on this topic, Jake.
Yeah. So this is learning and content, combining them. This is what it is, right? It's you're delivering your content with context, right? Like you said, John, it's like the only, anything that you're doing when it comes to enabling salespeople, it's either going to be based off of something new happening in the company, whether it's a new product being launched, a new message, a merger, restructuring, a reorganization, combining sales forces, changing. There's something new that happens, and whenever something new happens, let's take one of those examples for a product launch. There's training involved. There is coaching involved in doing role plays, and then from there, when the reps get out into the field and they're selling, they're using content. They're speaking to PowerPoint content. They are sending content to follow up after calls, right? So the whole process is not separated, right? So it's about making sure that we support that as a single process here. As you can see, supports self-directed learning, extends rep-to-rep knowledge sharing on content, right? So now you can allow salespeople to be able to see how others are sharing, using content. That drives up your adoption of content, because if I'm a rep and I can see another successful rep, this is how this person uses this deck, I'm going to go, oh, okay, and maybe I'll try that, right? Versus before, I might not have wanted to try something new. So there's all kinds of benefits here, and it's really exciting. It's leading to a whole new level of being able to really optimize our whole sales motions.
Yeah,
Jake, do you mind? Could you talk a little bit more about self-directed learning? Because I assume there must be some level of direction, right, in terms of like what content should be consumed when and how to proceed.
Totally. Yeah. So self-directed learning, that's kind of the kind of learning that reps are doing when they have a need, right? There's always that point, right? We start off where we train folks on what to say, what to do, what to show, what they need to know. But then there's always that point when they get out into the field and there's something that they don't know. There's something we couldn't have trained them on. Maybe something, in this new environment, it's there's new, the reps are a lot of times the ones who are the first person in our organization learning something new, how to sell virtually, right? That wasn't something we could train anybody on. We didn't know. So like that's where the self-directed learning comes in, where you give reps the kind of the baseline, and you get them coached and do role plays. But then from there, how do you make the knowledge available to them? How do you make when they need an answer from a subject matter expert, how do you make that available to them, bottled up in easy to access format?
Yeah. Colin, we talk a lot about learning in the flow of work and learning in the moment of need, right? And like Jake said, formal training sessions and onboarding sessions, those are good. We should keep doing them. Gives everybody a foundation to work off of. But we found, and shouldn't be surprised, people learn best when they really need the information, right? So like if I'm a rep and I've got a pitch in 15 minutes and I don't have a critical piece of knowledge, like I'm going to go find that. Like I'm going to go crowdsource my peers. I'm going to go into my content management system and do a search on it. Like I'm going to learn everything I can before that sales call so that I put myself in the best position to move that deal forward, right? Because that's my livelihood. That's like when I'm under pressure.
Right.
So or you're going to wing it. Because you might not find it. That's right. So
right. But the point is they're motivated to learn in that moment, right? You're not necessarily motivated to learn when you're in a 2-day training session in some hotel conference room, right? With like a trainer blabbing in your ear. I don't learn particularly well in that setting, right? But I learn when I have to do my job. So that's a lot of what we talk about is, of course, you need the formal training component and you need support and direction from your peers and managers. But if we can start to put more ownership of the learning process on the shoulder of the reps and trust them to learn when they need to learn and give them tools to help them do that, that's going to become stickier and more powerful, as you move forward.
100%. Cynthia in the chat says it's especially tough when you're onboarding and trying to use self-directed learning and all the tools, or there's information in different areas, different tasks and different tools. So yeah, that's a situation where you'd want something more directed, right? Onboarding. The self-directed learning comes later, like when the pain point hits, like right before a call, somebody realizes that they don't know enough about a competitor or something like that.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You need both.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit more about content management now in this next point. This is important because I think when a lot of us hear content management, we think about what's on this slide, right? It's how do you organize content? How do you tag content? How do you make it discoverable? And before we move on, like this is really important, and a lot of people don't do it very well, right? But there are usually two major reasons that reps don't use content that's available to them. One, and Jake, you're going to talk a little bit about this later, is that it's just not useful, right? Marketing, crazy marketers often in the marketing department created what they thought was a great piece of content, but they didn't consult with the sales team, right? They did it in a silo. And when they produced it, they published it, turns out it wasn't what the sellers needed. And we've all been there, like salespeople look at a piece of content that they're given and they're like, this is not helpful to me. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to go create my own thing, which we don't want, right? We don't want sellers going off creating their own content. So that's one reason. But the other, probably more common reason, is that they simply cannot find the content and they don't have time to find the content, right? So you need to make sure that whatever platform or content management tool that you're using, it needs to be well organized, right? It needs to have discoverable content. It needs to be easily searchable for reps. The content that's within there needs to be engaging. The system that you're using should be somewhat engaging so that it's intuitive, right? It's easy for reps to share content with one another. It's easy for managers to share content with reps. And it's easy to report on that content. So how often is it being accessed? How often is it being used and shared? And what's the impact of those results? That's table stakes for content management, right? But again, a lot of organizations are not doing this. So we need to spend some time here and just hammer home that this is really, really important, because without it, you're never going to get started with real content, impactful content management, and then what we call content activation. When we think about the idea of content activation, let's look at this point in the bottom left corner. The most valuable sales content in the world is worthless without a seller that uses it effectively. So this is about much more than making sure that the content is available. It's about more than making sure the content is discoverable. It's about how do we make sure that when a seller is given a piece of content, they understand how to use it in an impactful way. It sounds simple, but it's so often overlooked. So let's talk about content activation. That's what we call this, is how do you activate a piece of content and make it useful? At Allego, we use this term just-in-time learning, right? And when we think about just-in-time learning, it's powered by agile pieces of content rather than like really formal training modules or anything like that. So think about, if you release a new sales deck or a new case study to your sales team, don't just hand them the deck or this case study. Give it to them along with a video that shows how the deck or whatever content it was designed to flow. You could deliver a talk track alongside it that shows, hey, this is an example of how to use this piece of content really well. Maybe a 30-second video of whoever created the content talking about it, right? You could get a rep on the team to share a real-life example of how they've used this piece of content or something similar in the field impactfully, or get them to share a win story of how they used the content in a deal that went really well, right? These are just examples, but how can you surround content with these sort of bite-sized, again, agile pieces of content that help reps understand how it's intended to be used in just an easy to digest way, right? It shouldn't take a lot of work. It shouldn't take additional searching. It certainly shouldn't take additional training. It should just be presented alongside it and easy to access and easy to understand in a short amount of time, right? And it's almost
like meta content what you're describing, like little bits of content about how the content has worked.
That's a really great way to position it. It's exactly right. It adds depth to the content, so that people can understand it. Yeah.
I love that.
Jake, anything to add on content activation here? Because it's an important topic.
Yeah, it's the key is the context. It's like it's giving the context. It's like instead of just putting forth all of the great content that we've got for the reps to use, it's that plus, here is rich context around this content, because so much of the sales process happens through content exchange. So much of it is around how to educate prospects using the best materials that your organization, you as a rep, has to offer. And so that's kind of the key here with this, is like, if we just focus on providing the right content at the right, because we can, content management tools for the last 10 years have been doing this great with hey, serve up the right content piece at the right point in the sales process based on CRM data. We can look at analytics and see which pieces are driving the best conversion rates from one stage to the next, and make sure that those pieces are showing up to reps, in the different devices that they're working on. That's table stakes. But then from here, the issue that we're still seeing is that reps are still, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And you recommend the right content piece, but the rep is like, I don't have the context around, why am I supposed to use this? How am I supposed to use this? What's the main point of this? And so that's what this is kind of all about. It's to help that kind of that learning process on the fly.
Yep. And then the last point on this slide that I'll speak to is, once you understand how effective a piece of content is, and right, this goes back to the point of make sure you can track content, how it's used in the field, how it impacts sales cycles potentially. Once you know that and you get some feedback on it, then you can tailor practice and coaching around that content as well, right? So it starts, content activation and content management starts to impact learning and coaching and training, right? So we get this sort of cyclical, interdependent ecosystem of enablement that's powered by content. That's pretty cool. Alrighty.
Sorry,
Colin, you go ahead.
Yeah, we've got a good comment in the chat here from Shelby. And actually, maybe a couple questions here. They're probably related, but Shelby's basically saying that one of the challenges is keeping everything updated and relevant, acquiring new offerings like the value prop, the talk tracks are changing all the time. Almost like, how do you enable the enablers? Like, how do you know what people need to know, and then how do you make sure people actually know it when there's so much happening and rotating all the time?
Yeah.
Any tips on that?
Jake, you want to take that? That's kind of the world you live in, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's the thing. It's constant change, and you can't try to think about scheduling an enablement session every time something changes like that. I mean, when something big happens, if you've got a huge new offering coming or something like that, yes, but there's just constantly things changing. Talk tracks, things are evolving. That's why it's about creating a system where you are bringing this stuff into the flow of reps' work. That's why we put this whole thing with putting the rep at the center, and this stuff around that we're talking about with content activation, right? Learning in the flow of work, right? Making it so, you change something and you put out a new, a couple slides on and how to speak to it, right? In the past, you might have had to schedule a session or do a webinar. Now it's like, okay, capture a 2 to 3 minute video of from what your product marketing person or whomever, or yourself in enablement, talking through, here's a talk track for this. There's a couple new slides here. This was a change. Here they are, and here's a one sheet that you can use for this, or let's capture a couple of those new talk tracks on video. Let's get one of the salespeople, ping them, hey, can you shoot over? I know you've got a really great talk track for this. Can you capture it in a 2-minute video? Or maybe you're just with a single system like this that we're advocating for, a single approach. You grabbing footage from sales calls of, here's a great example of a talk track. Let's centralize that. Let's have that paired up with the deck that we're going to put forth in a recommendation engine, and that's getting automatically sent out to salespeople. So you might not even know that you've got a rep who's about to walk into a meeting, and they access a new talk track that was sourced from a rep, from somebody who developed something really nice, or from product marketing or whomever, and they're accessing that and accessing the new couple slides and the new one sheet or whatever it is that of this thing. And you've just enabled them, but it was automated, right? Because you were able to put that into, into recommendation engines. So that's kind of the key to just constantly, I can't think of the metaphor or it's the visual of like, if you're in like a sandbox and there's like holes around the corners and the sand is constantly like coming out the sides and you're trying to bring it all in and it's constantly coming out. That's kind of what it's like when you're in a state of constant change, is you're always kind of shoring up, all over the place. And so using these tools, using, these ways of automating knowledge sharing, and content, that's really kind of that's the way of the future.
I know one of the questions that I always get when people talk to me about sales enablement, not that I'm a pro, but I get to talk to a lot of smarter people like you two. So people always ask me about adoption. That's like always the question about in sales enablement. And what I think I'm learning so far today is that adoption isn't an issue if you're putting the things that they need to know in the workflow they're already using. There's nothing to adopt. They're already in the motion of selling. Give them the information when they need it, and the adoption handled, right?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it for sure. Again, in the flow of work is so important. Don't make your reps do something that's completely separate from their workflow, right? They won't do it. They don't do it. We've all seen it. It doesn't work. I will say that I think it's important to get reps to buy in, to get everybody to buy into the content creation process, right? To get comfortable. If you're using Allego, for example, you can pull out your phone and record a video of yourself sharing information about a call that you just had, or something new in the market, new competitive intelligence, something like that. That is something that reps need to form muscle memory around, right? Getting comfortable with being able to recognize, hey, I just learned something that could be valuable to the team. I'm not just gonna stash that in my brain or shoot a Slack message to somebody. I'm gonna record a video and talk about it for a minute or 2 minutes. And I'm gonna share that with my whole team, right? Because I know that this is valuable and I don't want to lose this information. That's something that takes that's a muscle that needs to be flexed, right? And I think they need to be shown examples of what that looks like and how to use it and how to do it. But what's really cool about that is once they get on that treadmill, right? And they start remembering to do it, it becomes self-sustaining because that information is so valuable, right? They see the value of it. They see the value in receiving that information, in creating that information. And again, it just starts up that wheel that becomes self-sustaining over time. Adoption is never perfect, but if you do it this way, it can be easier for sure. All right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Good. Let's, Jake, you want to talk about alignment? This is as they all are, this is an important issue, but I'm particularly passionate about this one, so I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Yep. Me too, for sure. As a former seller turned marketer, I'm very much, it's about the co-creation and, sales and marketing alignment. The point of the tip of the spear with sales and marketing alignment is enablement. And it is the enablement content that marketing is creating for sellers, the decks, the PowerPoint, the messaging, the one sheets, case studies, etc. That's kind of the tip of the spear, and that's a place where you can really drive a lot more as a marketing team. If you're really bringing the sellers into the mix and thinking in terms of creating minimum viable product when you're creating content, the content itself being the product, and bringing sales into that process and bringing having a couple salespeople checking out new things that you've got, new ideas that you have around a content piece, right? That's a way to really drive goodwill among the sales team because they feel like they're part of the process. When you release the piece of content, it has the right tone. It's got the right voice. It wasn't just, marketing in a smoke-filled room thinking about the value proposition, right? It's, it actually resonates. It actually reflects what is the reality on the ground. And that is really tough sometimes. And I know as a marketer, it's like you want to kind of be the hero. You want to really nail it and come up with a great idea. And then it's yours, right? When you put it out there. But the key to success is to let go of that and to say, okay, let's make this a collaborative process and let's bring the sales team in. And so the different ways that, and that becomes more difficult in this in more of a remote environment. But then there's tools, right? This is what we believe as part of a sales enablement tool stack, sales enablement single platform. for running this stuff is creating that mechanism for marketing to get feedback from sales during content creation. We see this all the time. Organization, product marketing managers I talk to over at lots of different companies. One, I'm thinking Red Hat. He was talking about, like, I love using the tool because I'm able to create a video walking through a couple slides that I'm thinking about, and share it with a couple key salespeople, and I get feedback, and they give me, we go point in time, and you can get, can leave feedback and have discussions point in time throughout the video of the, the product marketer or whomever walking through the presentation. And then the marketer is able to go back and say, okay, that's great points. Oh yeah, this salesperson thinks that. And so you can start to incorporate those really, the really good ideas from sales, because they're on the ground, they're talking to customers every day. And then, you can really kind of sculpt the perfect piece of content with sales. And then when you turn around and release it, you've got those folks who you just crafted that piece with. They're like your champions to the other sellers on the team now, because they're saying, hey, this is great stuff. Like, we helped in the process. And then the sales team just kind of starts to, they know that any stuff that you're releasing has the voice of the field in it. And so it really just kind of drives really good alignment there.
Yeah. This is important, and this is not like this has nothing to do with the pandemic, right? Like, this is just something that we should always have been doing, right? And we just haven't, because organizations aren't set up to think like this most of the time, right? In my experience, sales and marketing have been pretty siloed. And marketing goes off, and they're a smoke-filled room with their, their velvet chairs and their cigars, go off and create a bunch of content that they think is great, and then sellers don't use it. It should not be that way, and let's not make it that way moving forward, right? Jake, you want to talk a little bit about that sales and marketing alignment? You want to talk about just alignment amongst the sales team as well?
Yeah, and then that, all that. The same tools that we see organizations using for driving, alignment between sales and marketing, whether it's a marketer capturing, like the example I gave of the marketer capturing a video of here's an idea for a presentation and getting feedback from sales, or whether it's, marketing being able to watch recorded sales calls and jump to the value prop. Hey, we just released this new product, and I want to just jump to where they paint the vision. I want to watch like 5-6 different examples of sellers painting the vision, and then hear how prospects respond. I can jump in my, in the conversation intelligence, I can jump right to that point in a call, and I can listen to like 5-6 different calls in a matter of 30-40 minutes and really get a great feel. So all those same tools, that's also, being able to take those tools and allow sellers to learn from one another, right? Again, the key when it comes to sales enablement, it's top producer analysis, right? It's what are the top salespeople doing? What are they saying, right? How are they having such success? Let's make sure that we can clone them or replicate them, replicate those behaviors. And so being able to, again, using these same tools, maybe it's, you've got as an enablement team, you maybe after you do a product launch, or maybe after onboarding, you have a certification where they, go through and, every rep has to present the message live to a team. Or maybe you do that, a more kind of modern way of doing that is teams do that using video, where they all every rep, has to send in a 2 to 3 minute video of themselves presenting, and then you can leave feedback and scoring asynchronously, and then you can leave them comments, and you can leave scores along a rubric, right? Well, what happens when you've got all those videos coming in? Now you've got examples. That's all these examples of salespeople articulating the message, all in their different way. Every rep has their own style, their own way of making that message their own. And so you can now take those and bottle those up and put those alongside in a recommendation engine for learning on the fly. For another seller who's about to walk into a call and it can show in the CRM that they're about to sell this product. Well, let's surface the 3 best example videos from the certification from the reps, so they can learn from another salesperson. And that's who reps want to learn from most. They want to hear from other reps because they're in the arena with them, right? And so, being able to do that, and what you mentioned with a salesperson coming out of a call, right, where you can and they learn something, especially when it comes to like competitive stuff, because salespeople have such natural competitive spirit. And it is becoming so much more of a team now, where a salesperson captures a quick 2 to 3 minute video of something they learned and share it into the system, and then it gets curated and routed using workflow processes and artificial intelligence, and rerouted to another person who's going through it, about to walk into a similar situation with that competitor or with whatever it might be. And so these are how you can really start to almost kind of bottle and distribute, collaborate, knowledge, pieces of knowledge from salespeople in the know to others who are needing to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Then, the last point I'll make on this topic is that I do think that this is an area that has been accelerated due to the past year, right? And everybody going remote. Because before then, this was important, but you didn't have to think about how to capture the information quite as much, because often sellers are all sitting right next to each other, right? They're in a bullpen, they're having lunch together. There's a lot more in-person interaction. They're talking about this stuff. Now, I don't think that we were doing a good enough job of capturing that knowledge, right, and preserving that knowledge. But because people were talking about it in the office with each other, I don't think the importance of it was as obvious as it became once we were all remote, right? But now we know we have the tools to capture this information, to collaborate asynchronously and remotely, and to preserve that knowledge over time, and to preserve this form of collaboration over an extended period of time. So that's all I'll say there. All right, big topic. This could be a webinar all by itself, artificial intelligence. But I'm not going to talk your ear off about it. But I think AI is a tricky topic, because people have very strong reactions to the concept of AI, either like in a really positive way, or at least up to the extreme, like, hey, AI is gonna make my life so much easier. I'm not gonna have to work anymore. It's gonna be great. I can just sit back and relax. It'll do everything. Or on the very negative side, where it's like, AI is gonna take my job. Everybody's gonna be unemployed. The Terminators are gonna take over any day, right? It's like very extreme scenarios when we talk about this. Allego, at Allego, we don't really approach it that way. We approach AI as a tool, right? A tool to help us do our jobs. And I think that's when it's at its most powerful. So this first bullet, AI does not replace people, it enables them. That's important to keep in mind. A lot of vendors out there, not just in our space, but in every space, they use AI as a crutch term, right? Like, oh, we're powered by AI and machine learning, and it's going to be so great. And how often have you used a product that says that, and it turns out to not be true, right? It's way oversold. From our perspective, AI should be used to amplify human effort, right? Scale human to human connection, especially when we are remote. How do we stay connected to our teams? How do we gain the right insight into our team's performance, right? We need a guide. We need aids to help us, get a complete picture of team performance and how our training and enablement efforts are impacting the team. Because otherwise it's just so hard. It's just so hard to stay connected and to maintain the sufficient level of insight that's necessary in order to improve team performance and individual performance over time, right? So that's how we're thinking about AI. We want to get more specific about it. Again, at Allego, we're looking at the lens of sales enablement and thinking about AI in a couple of different broad buckets, right? So one, I'll say it's simpler, but it's not simple at all. It's actually like quite nuanced, but it's more foundational, I guess, which is this idea of content curation and recommendations that are powered by artificial intelligence. So that's something like predictive search, right? So when you're in your content management system and you're searching for a piece of content, the system can easily pick up on what you're looking for. It can fill in the rest of your phrase, or it can just surface the appropriate content, without a super high level of specificity, right? That's one really very basic example of how AI can help in sales enablement. Take it a level further, it can power content recommendations in a couple of different ways. So, the system can look at you and it can say, oh, you're Jake. You have this title. Other people with a similar title, or your peers, your colleagues, are looking at these 3 pieces of content that you might be interested in, right? Either to help you learn about something or something along those lines. Or it can take a look at, if you're a seller, it can take a look at a deal that you're working. Like it can look at your CRM data and it can say, hey, based on where this deal is, and based on the people involved, I, the system, think that these pieces of content could be really powerful in moving the deal forward, right? Based on assorted context inputs. So that all of a sudden has a much more impactful, that has a greater impact on the sales cycle and sales results and sales performance. So again, it's still incumbent upon the rep to utilize that content and to do it in a smart way, but the AI is assisting them to do it. But the second bullet point, virtual coaches and skill development, like this is where I think there could be some groundbreaking work. I think there already is some, but like especially over the next couple of years, like this is where there's going to be a huge impact. Because you think about sales coaching, like I was saying before, it is so hard right now, especially when teams are dispersed. How can a sales manager, how can a coach possibly understand how each of his team members are performing on an individual basis over time? Right? You see the stat here. On average, 20% of sales calls are reviewed. That means 80% are not reviewed. That's an unacceptable rate, right? It's just not enough information that's being analyzed at any given point in time to make a real impact, a positive impact on the funnel. So if you can have a tool, if you can have artificial intelligence that is analyzing all of your reps' calls, right? And now everybody's over Zoom or other video conference systems. You can record and analyze all of those calls, and AI can take a look at them. And it can tell you things like, oh, wow, this rep was talking really fast, right? Like, you should slow down. Or, he's using these X, Y, and Z filler words too much, right? What? And that needs to be cleaned up. The machine, the AI, can point to those moments, either in a live call or in a practice session, and it can say, hey, these are the areas that this rep needs to clean up. And it can guide a manager's eye to those moments so that they don't necessarily have to review every single piece of every single practice call or real call. They can have a more targeted view of what needs to improve or what a rep is doing particularly well, right? So you can train these virtual coaches that we're talking about to look out for really positive keywords or phrases, both on the part of the rep as well as the part of the prospect. And it can say, hey, this 15-second clip is something that we should look at as an example of what good looks like. Now we can share with the team so that they can replicate that interaction in their sales calls, right? So all of a sudden, we start to be able to scale the effectiveness of coaches, and not in a one-size-fits-all way, but in a very individualized way. And that's what I think is going to be really powerful as this technology continues to evolve and improve. And it's something that we are working really hard on here at Allego, and we're excited about the progress that's been made here. Jake, anything to add to this? This is, as I said, this is a meaty topic. We could go on forever on this one.
Yeah, no, that covers it. I think it's, if you think about where do you get the data on what's happening among the sales team? It's, a lot of it's on sales calls. And so it's like, how do we scale the coaching to calls? And, having these sort of personified AIs is really kind of a groundbreaking way to, it's like on a baseball team, you have a pitching coach and you've got a batting coach, and, those two folks are two different people with two different skill sets, and you can have one of those for your, using AI. You can have an AI product launch coach who does, any new product there. That's with a set of knowledge, right? That the AI has that applies to sales calls, applies to when reps send in for certification videos for that product, whatever it is. And being able to, have like a frontline, AI that is saying, okay, pinging a manager when a rep says something out of bounds on a call, and then this call needs to be coached to, or pinging the rep after the call and saying, hey, you said this. Here's some more information on that. You take this learning, or hey, the prospect said this on the call. Here's, they expressed this objection around compliance or whatever it is around your solution that there might be an objection with. And hey, here's the compliance white paper that you should send to them. Right. So you're now starting to, be able to really scale all aspects of your enablement this way, and being able to say, okay, here's a great example of what good looks like, of great messaging, great talk track. that have the AI be able to send to a manager or to the enablement leader, to yourselves, and say, hey, here's a great example of what good looks like. And then you can go in and clip that example out. And then you've got AI auto tagging it with all of the stuff, all the tags that are needed. So that way it shows up in a recommendation example, a recommendation for some other rep going into us. So that's where you can start to, again, with this notion of like, in a world of constant change, how do you keep up? And it's using AI to kind of fill in a lot of the gaps.
Yeah, that's right. It's filling in the blind spots, right? That's a good way to think about it. Awesome. All right, so just the last point here, and then we'll hopefully have a minute or two left for any additional questions. So, Jake, you want to talk about how to leverage this idea of asynchronous video?
Yeah. Yep. So this is, and we've got asynchro. What? So this is, asynchronous, right? So the difference between if you're watching this live right now, this is synchronous. We're speaking to you live. This is happening live. If you're watching the recording of this right now, this is asynchronous, right? So it's about, the two kind of, those are really the two modes of communication. And we've traditionally thought about synchronous quite a bit with video conference. That's how we use to collaborate, and especially when it comes to video. And when we think of asynchronous, we typically think more of like Slack or email or like text-based kind of, communicating with folks asynchronously like that. What we advocate for is start to use video in that paradigm. And that's, again, when you think about an enablement technology, asynchronous video has to be a key component, because to be able to share, knowledge, right? That the sales knowledge with lots of rich context that you can't just capture in text, right? If I've got talking points that I want to share to the sales team because something changed in the market or some new competitor entered or whatever it is, instead of typing up an email with the key points, why not create a 2-3 minute video talking it through? It shows it's easier to capture. First of all, if I've got ideas, I can kind of get on video and riff, especially when it comes to like talking about sales talk tracks and presentations and things, and how to position things, right? There's so much nonverbal. And it's easier to consume too. So a salesperson can watch a video and absorb that information much more easily than having to try to read through it in an email. And so I mean, that's one paradigm. Another is through coaching, right? We talked about going through and doing video role plays where you've got, if I'm a manager and I want to, I know I see my rep is walking into a discussion next week or negotiating around a particular product or whatever it is that this deal is about. I might shoot a video and send it over to them and say, hey, can you send me back a video of what you're going to say in this call next week? I want to role play it, asynchronously. So you can do that rather than having to schedule time to go through on a live call. And then reps are, as part of that video coaching, video role play paradigm, reps are practicing, right? They try to, okay, I'm going to articulate the message that I'm going to send for my manager who's asking me, or maybe I want to get feedback on what I'm going to present next week from my manager and a subject matter expert. I'm going to record a video asynchronously and share it with them. But before I send it to them, I'm probably going to end up doing a couple takes. I might practice once and it doesn't come out right. I do it again. That's opportunity right there. That rep just practiced instead of where they would have been practicing that in front of a customer, right? So it allows you, there's all these different ways to, when you think of enablement, capturing top producer practices and sharing them with others, right? The best way to do that is using video, right? That's the best way, the easiest way. Bottling up that lightning in a bottle, grabbing an example from a rep on a call, them articulating a message, 2-3 minutes. Let's share that with others. Let's put that in a recommendation engine, for reps who are going to walk into a similar situation. Let's add some quiz questions and a knowledge check and a couple other things and put that into our onboarding course. Because maybe this is some evergreen, talk track that's always going to be something that every rep should learn. So this is how you can really start to, when it comes to sharing knowledge, transferring knowledge, transferring skills, giving people context on the content they're using, right? Using asynchronous video. It's really key.
Yeah.
And then go for it, John.
No. I was just going to say, we've got some examples, some of which you've already given here, but do I just want to run through a few more examples of what this type of collaboration looks like?
Right. Yes. So prepping this for the sales, if a rep is going to prepare for a call, instead of booking a meeting to go through their presentation, they can do it on video. and get feedback asynchronously. And that would have been something where they had to book and get, align schedules. And that's not something reps are going to do unless it's like one or two big opportunities in a year. With this, you can get feedback on any important meeting. Driving skills practice, video role play, video coaching, objection handling simulations using asynchronously, like being able to, when the rep is recording, the system can pepper them with questions, right? So that they practice like a live conversation, answering questions. Driving message consistency, being able to capture best practices, just-in-time competitive intelligence sharing. It's easier if you want to have a rep do up a win report, why they won, or give a piece of knowledge. It's easier to have them capture it on a video and riff than it is to ask them to type it up. Every time, it's easier. And then remote training and certification, of course. Asynchronous content is becoming such a bigger factor because now we can't do as much live synchronous.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are the examples.
No, I think this is great. This is core to a lot of what we do at Allego, and I think it's really important, not just in sales enablement, but just in terms of workforce enablement, right? Especially now, and we're talking about doing a lot of fairly sophisticated things here, right? But it's important to remember you don't have to just jump into the deep end on this stuff, right? There's a starting point. There are different stops along the way in your sales enablement journey where you can make meaningful steps forward without doing every single thing we've talked about today, right? But just giving your team an easy way to communicate when they're on different schedules, right? In different time zones, when they have different personal obligations, they have childcare they have to worry about. We shouldn't be locked into a live calendar, and the solution should not be email, right? Because email has its own problems. I don't get to my emails until midnight most nights. It's not the most effective way of communicating with me. So thinking about communication in just a more sophisticated, again, an evolved way, to give your team the flexibility they need to communicate on their terms is really important. And no matter what tool you're using, I really encourage you guys to think about this as we go forward. So that's it. That's all of our points. We talked about how to embrace the learning and content love story. It's a beautiful love story. You should embrace it. Those two worlds belong together. We talked about maturing past content management, right? Just the discoverability and organization of content, to content activation, where you're activating content and telling reps how to use it in an impactful way. How to achieve true alignment. We know how important this is, getting sales and marketing on the same page, how to get sales teams on the same page. If you don't have this third point, you may as well not do any of this, right? So really focus on that. Make sure that you're buttoned up when it comes to alignment amongst all of your teams. We looked, both into the future as well as into the present with what you can do with AI and how that's going to continue to grow over time. Again, that can be scary territory to enter, but it's really impactful. And again, it's all driven by human effort. It's driven by effort that's likely already on your team. So don't be too scared of it and embrace it, just like everything else here. And then we of course just talked about asynchronous video and giving your team the tools they need to communicate on their time when they're able to, right? So with that, I think we have 2 minutes for questions. If we have anything else, Colin, and I definitely want to encourage everybody to connect with us on LinkedIn, reach out if you want to have more detailed conversations about what we discussed today. And if you want to dive deeper into this topic as well, you can check out the ebook that's on the screen here, Sales Enablement Evolved, at this URL. Just goes deeper into everything we discussed. So definitely encourage that. Oh, Colin, I think you're on mute.
I was on mute. Yeah, there's always one. I'm sorry, I had to be the guy today. We've got one interesting question I think we could get a quick take on. So Mark Steele brought this up. He brought up value mapping. It's a trend he's seeing come up in sales enablement, like a tool of actually mapping directly and explicitly value in your platform or your product or service to customers' pain points and challenges. Cynthia had a question about it. So what's the quickest, most effective way to implement that? Any experience rolling out programs like that?
Jake, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think I look at that as kind of a product marketing and sales enablement task for sure. Where I think a lot of the inputs from that are going to come from sales enablement, because sales enablement is closest to the calls, closest to the field, closest to what's happening, to be able to go through and map all of the what are the key challenges? Another way to do that is looking through, it's something we've done, and again, speaking to how to do this easily, capturing win report videos. So what we do, and we see a lot of organizations doing this, is you go through, and anytime reps close a deal, they go ahead and capture a win report, talking through, and then we get, you can have a PowerPoint loaded up ready. Here are the things we want you to speak to, and one of those things should be, what is the key business challenge? And then going through and just analyzing those win reports, and you can running those through conversation intelligence to be able to pull out the topics of what are the business challenges, and then you can get a roll up of like, what are all the key business challenges that folks are seeing, and what were the solutions that we ended up selling them, and then being able to kind of put together that picture of what are all because it's true, every you should be mapping every aspect of your solution to a business challenge within an industry or within a segment. And yeah, so you can definitely use some of these tools to do stuff like that. But it's always going to take some level of an analysis, right? But like with all this stuff, you can supplement it.
All right. Thanks for that. That was awesome. Great condensed answer to it. Is really a big question. John and Jake, thanks so much for bringing all the value today. And to all of our live attendees or those watching in the future, really great showing, awesome discussion, great questions from some new members. I saw some of you in there, some people who have been around for a while. It's always great to see the community get together in these webinars. So thanks to everyone, especially to our partner Allego, excuse me. Check them out, allego.com/evolved for that ebook. And we'll see you all soon.